Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great week. For this week's check-in, I wanted to go over the article that we are assigned to read this week called The Age of Disbelief. There are a few things within this article that I find really interesting and thought-provoking and great conversation starters. And it's also a great way to check in with ourselves in regards to how we perceive scientific facts and methods and how that meshes with what we believe. And in previous modules, we've learned the differences between beliefs and information that's been gathered through the scientific method. And this article that we're assigned to read this week from the Shapiro Library, it's a really great piece to help us understand how various outside sources can actually influence our personal perceptions of scientific information. So one of the themes that we see consistently through this article is the reiteration that science is not a body of facts. It is not a system of just absolute truth. That's not what science is about. Science is a process. It's a method. It is a way to collect information to see if how we perceive something actually abides by the laws of nature. So I thought this is a great theme to focus on throughout this article because it is very different from how many people, scientifically literate or not, view science. They view it as absolute truth. They view it as the end all be all of information, and that's not how it works. Scientists, we are constantly researching, we're constantly collecting data, we're constantly testing ideas to see if what we currently know to be accurate consistently holds up to those standards, to those methods. And when we uncover something new, like we've been talking about with the different steps of a paradigm shift, when we uncover something new, that can usher in a new set of information, a new reality, so to speak, of perception. So I think that is a great concept to consider as you're working through this particular article and checking in with yourself to see how you personally perceive science prior to entering this course or currently today. Is it something that you view as just a set of facts that you have to learn, or do you view it as a process, an evolution of knowledge? And that kind of leads into what the article discusses. It says the scientific method leads us to truths that are less than self-evident, often mind-blowing, and sometimes hard to swallow. And that is very true when a discovery ushers in a paradigm shift. And it goes on to discuss the example of Galileo and his observations of the Earth revolving around the sun as opposed to the sun revolving around the Earth. That was a game changer. It also discusses Charles Darwin and his theory of natural selection and biologic evolution. And then it goes on to discuss how our modern day paradigm shift could be considered the one regarding climate change. Now, there's a concept in this article that I really find interesting, and that is naive beliefs. And it's kind of like saying that our instinct, our initial view of the world around us sticks with us. Even though as we go through life, we collect information, we read the science, we increase our scientific literacy, those naive beliefs that are kind of cornered in the back of our minds, they stay there, even though we know them to be untrue. And that can lead to confirmation bias, and that can also trickle into different areas that are not even science related, such as your political beliefs or your religious beliefs. So that is something that I have found interesting in this article. Now, another thing on this page of the article, it says, even for scientists, the scientific method is a hard discipline. And that is so true. That is such a true statement, because it goes into talking about confirmation bias. And we've said this before in our course. Humans are scientists. Scientists are humans. We have our own biases and beliefs and what we want to see coming from our own research and our results. And we have to shove that to the back of our mind. We have to not allow that to infiltrate into the data that we collect and the conclusions that we make. So it is hard for us, even though we're scientists and we're very pragmatic and we, follow the method. It is difficult for us sometimes to, well, I wouldn't say difficult. I would say we'd have to be very aware of what we are thinking and how we are interpreting data and how we are drawing conclusions, just to make sure that our own naive beliefs are not, I guess you could say, they're not contaminating or tainting that conclusion that would be considered as part of the new scientific set of information. There's another interesting point made in this article that kind of goes against what most people consider as science or scientific. It says scientific results are always provisional. They're not the end-all be-all absolute truth once they are found. They are susceptible to being overturned by some future experiment or observation. And I think I mentioned this, I don't know if it was in an announcement or a previous check-in. It might have been in on Monday's announcement, but we ask why. I mean, we're constantly asking why, and the answers to those why questions, those are our scientific results, but they only last as long until the next scientist comes along and asks an even better why question. So our set of information, and we are experiencing this in real time with the coronavirus pandemic. Scientists are refining the way that they ask why as we learn new information, as we gather data. And the answers that we have now are not the answers that we're going to have in a month from now, in 6 months from now, 5 years from now. So the science is constantly evolving to the data that we have available, and it is reflective upon our ability to ask that why question in a more refined manner and into a more inquisitive manner. From this point forward, this article begins to talk about some of our big course concepts, some that we have already talked about, such as big money, and some that we will talk about next week and the week thereafter, regarding politics and the role that politics plays in science. We've already talked a little bit about the media and the bias in the media. We've talked about big money, and all of these things, media, politics, bias, and big money. You can wrap those up in a box and put a bow on it. They all go together. And there's a great example in this article discussing some of the political figures that claim climate change is a hoax, and how that has simply been reinforced by the fossil fuel industry, who are pouring their big money into ensuring that legislation is not passed that will limit them from making their profits. I also like this point that the article makes about the media, saying the media wants you to believe that science is full of shocking discoveries made by these lone geniuses. And of course, that couldn't be further from the truth. The media, of course, their goal is to make money. They've got to sensationalize things, and that's one of the ways that they do that. There is a study further down in this article. It talks about science communication and how there's a science communication problem, and that leans in towards people's tendency to disbelieve scientific information. And I completely agree with that. I think scientists, we are not the greatest communicators. We can appear to be standoffish, and that's why I think the works of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who are making science accessible, discussing it in plain terms, discussing it in a conversational manner, that is something that's going to be very important as we move forward, especially with the age of the internet. The internet is something that is discussed in this article as well, and it has completely changed the way that people view scientific information, because the internet contains every view on every topic and then some. So there's a study in here about science communication, and I guess you could say the correlation between someone's scientific literacy, their level of scientific literacy, and how strongly they view, in this example, the threat of climate change. And the results from this study were very interesting. The scientists here found that higher levels of scientific literacy were associated with stronger views at both ends of the spectrum in terms of how they view the threat of climate change. So it says their conclusions are that scientific literacy, which we would think would be something that promotes accurate information and accurate viewpoints of scientific topics, this study found that science literacy promoted polarization rather than agreement or consensus on certain topics. So I found that also to be extremely interesting. And it's simply, I guess the more scientific knowledge you have, you simply have more access, or where to get information that simply reaffirms what you personally believe. And that is what the study found. So instead of actually taking scientific evidence and reviewing it and looking at all of the work, looking at the whole body of work, as opposed to just one or two studies by one or two scientists, the higher rates of scientific literacy are actually contributing to polarization of viewpoints, which, if we see that clearly on the internet. You can type any topic into a Google search, and you're going to see so many different viewpoints of that particular topic. Now, moving on into how the internet has changed science. I'm old enough to remember what life was like without the internet. I grew up my entire childhood. There was no internet. There was no smartphones. We had to go to the library to check out our books, to write our book reports. So as an adult, I've seen the internet completely change the way that information is exchanged, the type of information that is exchanged, and we can see, I get, of course, it has allowed all of us to be connected. I mean, I am talking to you, and without the internet, I would have never been able to do that. But it also allows people groups of people who have viewpoints that are not consistent with scientific information. It allows the internet as a platform for them to share those ideas, which that's what it's for, of course. That is, I'm not knocking that, but it opens up those inaccurate viewpoints to more people than what would have been exposed to them without the internet. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And that's what this article goes into. It says the internet has allowed it, of course, and with cable TV, it says, it's made it possible for us to live in a filter bubble. What does that mean? A filter bubble? We select what channel on TV we watch. We select what website we go to get our information. We are filtering the information that comes into us, and that prevents us from actually seeing all of the information from an objective viewpoint. If we choose the information that we are exposed to, then we are filtering the information that we receive. So it says it only lets in the information in which you already agree. So that is something that perhaps we need to check in with ourselves. I know that's something that I need to do. There's 1 or 2 cable TV channels that I watch, or cable news, and perhaps I need to branch out and check out what's going on those other channels from time to time. It also perhaps means that I should cut out cable news altogether. All right, so let's see here. Okay, and sort of towards the end of this article, it continues with the, the climate change debate is something that can be used as a great example in our modern times, because it is our Galileo moment. It is our Darwin moment. And so that's why this article does fall back on it as an example so often. And it makes a really great point in terms of the networking, I guess, that industry and politics and media have in driving the direction of scientific research. It says they haven't had to win the debate on climate change. They just have to muddy the waters just enough to keep that doubt alive, and to keep that, which keeps the legislation and regulations from being put into place. So, that's kind of what the name of the game is currently. You just got to keep enough doubt stirred up to make a difference and to keep us from pushing forward with climate change action. There's another quote in here from this article. It says, in science, it's not a sin to change your mind when the evidence demands it. And I think that might be something that a lot of us just in general might have problems with. Once we settle on an issue, our position on an issue, we are not changing, and I don't care who says what. This is what I said, so this is what I'm sticking to. Science is not that way, and we are seeing that again. Just take a look at all of the information that has come out with the coronavirus pandemic, and just studying this virus and how it behaves, and the pathways that we've been developing to develop treatments and vaccines. It's not a sin to change your mind when you're wrong. If there's evidence that comes out that shows, hey, what we thought before is not really the best way to go about doing this, then we shift. It's what I was talking about last week in my announcement. Science cycles. We go up and down. Science is always cycling as evidence comes in. So science, again, is not a body of absolute fact. It is a method. It is an evolution of a set of knowledge. And this article finishes up by saying everybody should be questioning. And that is the theme for us this week, is why. And why is that that is the best question that you can ask about anything. It doesn't have to be just about science, but everything. Why is the question? So it says everybody should be questioning. That's a hallmark of a scientist. Scientists are constantly asking why. But then they should use the scientific method or trust people who are using the scientific method to decide which way they fall on those questions. So it is good to be asking questions, but you shouldn't allow your naive beliefs or your preconceived notions about what the answer might be to that question. You shouldn't allow that to get in the way of what the answer actually is. So you yourself need to employ the scientific method to uncover that answer, or you need to trust people who are using the scientific method to find those answers. And so I think that is where we are in today's society. It's about trust. It's about finding these sources of information that you can trust. And that is another concept that is discussed in this article. You know, I didn't go over every single thing that is said in this article, but that is another point that the author makes, is that somebody who is skeptical about a particular issue, they are more likely to change their viewpoint if someone who they trust communicates with them about it, rather than pushing a set of facts on them, like, here's the information, here's the data, this is why you shouldn't believe that. If you have somebody who the person trusts come in and talk to them about it and give that information in a different approach, that's usually when we see a shift to a different viewpoint. So I do think that's where we're at right now. Right now, coronavirus is pushing the limits of sources of information, reliable sources of information. Trusting science. You know, we have scientists who we would have never heard of Dr. Fauci if it was not for coronavirus. You would have gone through life never knowing all of the amazing things that he has done if it wasn't for coronavirus. So we have these figures that are being thrust into the public spotlight, and we have to understand that they are the experts in their field. They are doing their very best given the circumstances and given the set of knowledge that we currently have about coronavirus. And you also kind of have to be a little sympathetic towards scientists who are thrust into the public spotlight, because we are not used to that. We are used to, you know, being in our own little world in our labs or in the field conducting research, and we often publish research that has minimal effects on our fields. Something that I mentioned previously in another announcement. Scientists, we are very aware that our likelihood of triggering a paradigm shift is zero. We know that we're not going to change the world. We simply do this to add to our body of knowledge about the world around us. And so we're not used to being in the public. We're not used to being thrust into a position that, quite frankly, makes us a little uncomfortable. And so when you see scientists who are currently in the spotlight with coronavirus, and we're doing our best, I promise that we're doing our best to get you the information that you need in a very uncertain time. But you also have to know that as scientists, we know that what we tell you today may change in a week, it may change in a month, it may change in a year. And that's something that we need the public to also understand, is that science is not absolute fact. It's methods, and it is a constant evolution of information that it has to be open to changing as new information comes in. So I hope that this article expands your perspectives and it hits on a lot of concepts that we've already discussed in the course and a few that we will hit on later in these final weeks of the course. So it's just something to think about, something to get your gears grinding on some of these concepts, and it is a great segue into the final weeks of our course. So if you have any comments that you would like to share about this article, feel free to email me. Feel free to post in the general questions discussion. I would love to hear what stood out to you about this particular article, because there's a lot in there. And I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts about how you maybe have checked in with your own ways of approaching scientific information, and how you think how do you think the best ways are to navigate through this current age of disbelief? Hope you guys have a great weekend, and please let me know if there's anything I can do for you. I'm here for you.